My journey of fatherhood, I would say it's taught me a lot. I think before fatherhood, I could say maybe I think everybody, just focus on you and what it is that you got going on. And then when you have this person, even before they get here, I was trying to line myself up, right? So I could even think back when I found out we were having a child, doing all the things, right, to make sure that I started eating better, exercising, because like I was like, it's like all these things that I want to be able to do with the kid. And so, from that very onset, it made me kind of start thinking outside of myself. And I think that is what has carried through for me, or has shown me it's given me the opportunity to step outside of myself to help grow and develop this child into the person that they are today, right? And then also seeing that although I can kind of correct and guide, ultimately they're their own individual, they're their own person, and they're going to have their own perspectives and feelings and ways of dealing with challenges and things like that. And again, it's my job to be there to stand alongside them along that journey. And then, when they discover new things and as they grow, it's like it's a reward that you can't put words to, you can't put a dollar amount to, but because it grows you too, and it challenges you to kind of again look within yourself to be better.
What's up, y'all? This is Aaron. Welcome back to From Dad with Love. I'm excited to keep this thing going. Got a new guest with us today, Kwame, and excited to hear about this brother's journey, his story of fatherhood, and just build community. So, man, that said, Kwame, welcome to the show, man. Glad to have you on. Appreciate you being here, man.
Now, what's going on? What's going on? I'm excited to be here. Looking forward to this conversation. Yes. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, man. Well, that said, kind of started off, man. How would you describe your journey of fatherhood right now, and how that shows up?
My journey of fatherhood, I would say it's taught me a lot. I think before fatherhood, I could say maybe I think everybody, just focus on you and what it
Yeah.
is that you got going on. And then when you have this person, even before they get here, I was trying to line myself up, right? So I could even think back when I found out we were having a child, doing all the things, right, to make sure that I started eating better,
Okay.
exercising, because like I was like, it's like all these things that I want to be able to do with the kid. And so,
Right.
from that very onset, it made me kind of start thinking outside of myself. And I think that is what has carried through for me or has shown me it's given me the opportunity to step outside of myself to help grow and develop this child into the person that they are today, right? And then also seeing that although I can kind of correct and guide, ultimately they're their own individual, they're their own person, and they're going to have their own perspectives and feelings and ways of dealing with challenges and things like that. And again, it's my job to be there to stand alongside them along that journey. And then, when they discover new things and as they grow, it's a reward that you can't put words to, you can't put a dollar amount to,
Right.
but because it grows you too, and it
Yeah.
challenges you to kind of again look within yourself to be better. So yeah.
Yeah. So you said in the beginning you're talking about how you initially, even when you found out you was about to have a kid, you start putting yourself in that position to like be prepared. You make me think back when I knew I was getting ready to have my daughter, and my wife and I were taking all the classes, every class, birthing classes. But then I came across like a conscious fathering course. I took that, and I was similar to you, like trying to prepare myself. Is this like the model that you've seen prior of like prep yourself when you're about to have a kid, or was this like something that you said I need to do differently, or just want to show up as a better version of me as a dad?
It's a good question. So I don't think I had. So I grew up in a two-parent household, so my mom and dad were there. I think I come from my family background is we're from West Africa, from Ghana. So it's really a lot more about do as you're told. It's more about the education. There's a lot of opportunity, I'd say, for kind of like the soft things, right? So in preparation of what it is to be a father, so even the idea of, how do you prepare for this? How do you support your wife in this, right? Like those weren't conversations that I was having with my dad. And so I don't think I looked for a blueprint, but I understood the responsibility that was coming ahead and how much that was going to change our family dynamic or our relationship dynamic, I should say, at the time. And so I think I made the conscious effort to say, like, if I'm going to be a father to this child, I don't know what all that entails, but I've got to get myself lined up. And what for me at the time, what that meant was I need to get my health back together because I would have, from my mind, from my perspective at the time, it's like, I want to be an active dad, right? I want to
Yeah.
be able to do all these things with my child. And so that was kind of like that starting point of kind of consciously making an effort to do
Hmm.
something different. And so that's where it started. And I think the other thing that really sticks out for me is having a kid doesn't come with like a roadmap. It doesn't come with a guidebook. It's like once the child is here and they make sure everything is good. They
Yeah.
like, man, you got that car seat? Here you
Hey,
go. And
hey, hey, man, the drive away, when you drive away from the
bruh,
hospital, you're like, man, like, wait, I'm not, hold on, I'm
I'm
not
not ready.
ready.
I mean, I was probably doing like 25 and the 45, and anybody that was I was ready. I was like,
Hey,
yo, like,
facts.
what's wrong with you? I got precious cargo in this car with me,
Right.
so like, chill out.
Man, I remember
But
that like that was yesterday.
yeah, but the beautiful thing about it is that, I think over time, what that taught me to, right? Like was like how, I guess, precious, yes, right? But I think the other thing is like you don't realize how tough these children are and how resilient
True.
and just and give me a great appreciation of just like life and like that whole process of like how it all happens. It's just like, now we have all this technology. So imagine back in the day when you didn't have all of that and then the know-how and all of these things, like how these things came together. So give me a greater appreciation for that. But with that being said, it's like you learn,
Hmm.
right? And I think you have to have a sense of awareness of, oh, okay, I tried this the first time. Probably not the best way to go about it. Or even, I feel like this is this fragile thing, but it's like, no, like they're resilient. They're going to be okay. And I think those were kind of in the early days. Those are the things that I learned the most is just like, there's no right way, right,
Yeah.
to do anything. And you got to give yourself a little bit of grace. You have to be aware and have as the child grow and as you grow and mature and things of that nature, you'll start to develop, who you want to be as a
Hmm.
father.
Yeah.
I think kind of you alluded to kind of based on your own experiences, some things that you may have experienced that you're like, you know what, there may have been an opportunity to go about it different from my father, right? And so what can I glean from that so that I don't do the same thing or I give my child an opportunity to have a new experience? Actually, take it back. I give my child and myself an opportunity to have a new experience. And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's I think it's a real challenging concept because when I think back about, wanting to be a better father, learning along the way, there was definitely moments where, there's parts of my upbringing that I don't know is problematic for the sense of I'm a true believer. I think like when you get children, they're going to like shine a light on areas of your life that you didn't know was there
Hmm.
for good or for worse, right? And so, like, I just recall where when I had my daughter, man, it was like patience. Like, I thought I had patience, but this is a different level of patience that I need right now. And
Hmm.
I know I want it, but it's a challenge for me because I never had somebody shine a light on the fact that I got to do some growth around patience. And so having my daughter really was like shining a light on areas that I needed to work on, to improve, to strengthen, and still show up as a partner in that
Hmm.
process. And so I definitely think like there's a lot that goes into wanting to, to grow, to develop on the fly, right? Because like you
Hmm.
said, there isn't a manual. I think if there was a manual on day 7, you throw that thing out the window like, Nah, this ain't lining up to my this ain't line the manual is not lining up. But no, man, I just think that, there is definitely things that you're going to discover about yourself, from the very beginning, from the early
Mhm,
stages of, how you show up for your partner during the pregnancy, when you
mhm.
have your kid, in that early stage, your kids don't really want you because you ain't got liquid gold. Like, you know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? You can't give them that. You changing these diapers and like you start you're introduced real quickly into like, all right, concepts are starting to come to the surface that maybe I need to, to really pour into for myself to be a better person, better father. So yeah.
yeah. No, I would say too, that's the thing I think I heard you say at the beginning that I've become aware of through my experience as a father is that I grew up in a lot of trauma, and the trauma that I grew up in was normalized because of my environment. So, I think I may have mentioned this, but my family is from West Africa. We're from Ghana, but I grew up in the Bronx, New York, and a lot of things that I was exposed to growing up in my community, and I had a great community, middle class, hardworking Africans, Hispanics, very immigrants, right? Trying to make better for their kids. But then we lived in a neighborhood that had other things going on. And so we were exposed to all of that. But that was normal for us. And I think one of the best things that probably happened to my family was us moving out to the West Coast and being exposed to something different from what we're used to.
Gotcha.
And that in turn made me think like, wow, like I thought I had to raise my child in this environment for her to be tough and, all of these things. But I realized that was survival. Like
Right.
I
Right.
grew up actually surviving as opposed to thriving. And I think my perspective has shifted greatly to the point where it's like I try to balance again the things that I grew up in, the things that I believe to be the quote unquote right way to do something, or some things that we just didn't do in my community, right? It's like I'm challenging that, and it's like actually, why is it that I don't want to go hiking, right? Like it's there
Yeah.
for me, and it, if anything, it has exposed my child to something new, and we can share that bond in that moment, and I could be honest about it, like I don't know what's out there. I'd rather walk through, the toughest neighborhood on
Right.
anybody's block,
What
right?
it's familiar. Yeah, it's familiar.
I could do that, right?
I
But
train. I trained for that.
you know what I'm saying? But going into the woods, you got bears, tigers and right? Like I don't know what to do when these things come out, right? And so,
Yeah.
but it's like we can have that growing experience and she can have that. And then at the same time, it's like I don't keep her away from my community. I take her there so that she can get exposed to and get an understanding that the world is much bigger than this one experience that you're having right now. It's my job as your dad to expose you to as much as I can. And then at the same time, show you that, you know, have an open mind, right? Be open to trying new things. And whatever that new thing is for you, I want you to be confident, comfortable, secure in who you are enough to be like, it's not going to change me or anything like that. But if anything, it's going to open my mind and my brain to something new. And that's a beautiful thing. And so, those are like the type of things that I try to instill in Savannah, to this day.
Yeah, and you said something about when you grew up in trauma, like you're in survival mode, and I think what I believe is important is like we also got to be aware of the trauma. We got to be, I was talking to another dad not too long ago. And we were talking about how like you could impose your trauma on your kids, like you can imprint your trauma on your kids, even if you're built in survival mode. Sometimes that survival parenting has things that come that are byproducts of that, right? Like you said, you may limit your kid from trying to go do something new because of your own personal fear of
Hmm.
getting injured or whatever the case may be. You put that down to your kids. So, when we talk about growing up in traumatic environments, I think the other piece of that is talking about like how do we get through that? How do we get past, some of those experiences because, we can't just sweep those things under the rug and hope that
Hmm.
they never present themselves because you're going to get hit with a question, an emotion, you're going to get hit with something that all of a sudden opens that door up and then if you put all that trauma in the closet, the old school way of cleaning up, where you put everything under the bed in the closet, close it,
Hmm.
and anything could happen, and it will shed light on a part of your life that you haven't probably really processed through. So, I don't know what your experience has been around just identifying and acknowledging some of that trauma that you had growing up. and how you process through that when you have kids, right?
Yeah, and I think it goes all the way back to that little thing that came to me where it was like, okay, I need to figure out how do I prepare myself for this child that's coming. And part of the work for me was going to therapy, right? Therapy for myself. And then my wife and I, we did marriage counseling, premarital counseling before we got married. And again, that gave us an opportunity to expose some of those things. My wife, we've been together, what, 23 years now, but we've been married for 13. And so many of the challenges that we faced, I think we faced before we got married. Not to say like it's cake or anything, but again, because we were kind of operating as, and we were operating as if we were married in a sense
Uh-huh.
at a very early age. I don't recommend that. But I think what it did help us with was going through some of the challenges that I think couples go through when they do get married, right? We went through those things early. And so I remember we went to our first like therapist session while we were in college. And I remember vividly it was like a student who was going for their degree, seeing us
Okay.
for free or whatever have you, and letting us know. She was like, you're never gonna make it. Right. You guys should just quit. You guys should just quit while you're ahead.
Wow.
Y'all got too much going on. And we looked at each other like I thought you were supposed to be here to help us.
Right.
Like figure
Man.
this thing out. But I think we took that and was like, okay, whatever it is that she's saying, it sounds kind of is jarring. But if we really do want to be together, there's work that we probably both need to deal with individually. She comes from a single parent household, strong mother, strong black mother. I could do everything by anything by myself kind of thing. And it's like I don't need no man. A man is like a support, right? But it's not a necessity, right? So that's kind of the kind of vibes that we were dealing with. And I come again from traditional 2-parent household, 2 incomes, both parents working. I think that's where my work was, right? Her family, they have family meetings. My family, no such thing exists. I tell you, this is what's done. This is how it's done. And it comes top down, right? And so to kind of bring it back, it was like me realizing that therapy was important to shining a light to those areas of trauma that I may have not realized
Hmm.
was important. And I remember vividly getting into one situation where I interpreted that I was pretty much standing up for a group, but it was pointed out to me that I was actually being very aggressive in presentation and getting that feedback from others who were present but not a part of the direct conference with me. And it was like, oh, I thought I was out here doing a good thing on behalf of all of us.
Right, right,
But
right.
I actually wasn't. Okay, cool. Let me sit down and let me unpack what was really going on. And let me find someone to have a conversation with. And I had to interview many different therapists, right? Like with the same questions. And I finally found someone that I think that we connected with. I'm sorry, that I connected with, and being able to sit down and kind of just talk through my history and all of that, and me trying to reinvent myself because early years of my childhood, I lived in so many different spaces and had to continue to reinvent myself. And then it's like, how does that show up, today? Never thought about that. I'm just living life. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? And so, again, just to bring it all the way back, it's like I think therapy is very important in terms of being able to shine a light on the work that you need. And then also to be able to take that and identify how you would navigate that as a father with your own children. And that's helped me greatly.
Man, I commend you on just taking that path, man, because there's, we'd be surprised, man. There's not a lot of dads. I mean, there's dads for sure, but not a lot that have done therapy work. Especially when you think about like the black community, the stigma, I think sometimes that comes with mental health and all of that.
Absolutely.
So I definitely commend you on that and commend you on doing that just as a father and also just as a black man's one, just 100% uh you know, support in that work for sure, because that's something that I think I had to do myself. How would you think your daughter would describe you as a dad?
Well, I think she sees me as someone that's laid back. I support anything and everything that she wants to do. I'm her biggest cheerleader, give constructive criticism when necessary. But I would say, like, she's like, yo, my dad is super laid back. Like, nothing could rattle. ruffle his feathers. He's just a chill dude. I think that's what she would say.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Man, I think, shoot, I think about that question. One, I think my kids, well, because they're at different ages. So I think my daughter, who's 9, would be like, I'm the dad that if she wants me to dance with her, like I'm gonna get out there and do it. If she'll test me like, Dad, can you do this? And I know the knees ain't what they used to be, but I'm like, yeah, I could do that. And so I definitely would think my daughter would think I'm the dad that is willing to try to do whatever she's, passionate about. She's really into art and culture and singing and dancing. And so I'm that dad that's like, yeah, I can do that. Like, let's do it. We're going to learn the routine together. Like, let's go.
Mhm.
And then I think from my son's perspective, I'm the dad that is still letting his imagination grow. So like,
Beautiful.
he's in the superhero phase. And if he wants to be Iron Man tomorrow or Spider Man, like I gotta hold this dude up in the air and like let him, pretend like he climbing on the walls and like
Yeah.
so I definitely think that they would say I'm just that engaging type of dad that's willing to get out there. I think on the flip side of it, they probably would say dad's feathers gets a little ruffled. And I think in all honesty, I think part of that is just the ongoing work of
Mhm.
on self, you know what I'm saying? And you talked about this just briefly, but I think when you have traumatic upbringings or the environment was really hard and you want to consciously do the opposite of that thing, and create new experiences and environments for your children. It's ongoing work, man. Like, it could be a couple days where everything's good and I'm super dad. And then there's days where it's like, I'm stressed and, me creating an environment where my kids can express themselves, fully. I'm talking like, express at the developmental stage that you express yourself, right? And then when I reflect, like I didn't have that opportunity to express myself that way. So
Yeah.
sometimes there's like a budding of beliefs that happen in my head at the same time. I'm like on one hand, it's like, no, we don't yell and slam doors because that's not what
Mhm.
we do. But then the other version of me is like, but you want to create an environment for your kids that they feel safe, that they can come to you when things are hard, they can yell. So I think my kids would say like some days dad's feathers get ruffled, other days, he's super dad. So but that's good. I'm glad to hear all of those wonderful things that your daughter would say about you. And that's definitely commendable for sure.
Nah, I would say I think something that my wife and I have, and I got to give her credit for it, instituted for ourselves before Savannah got here was having family meetings. And so with Savannah, we've incorporated her into our family meetings, and she has her agendas, and we ask her questions about how is dad doing? What is one thing that I've done that made you feel happy, or like that would, I can't remember exactly how we have it worded, but the idea is to get an understanding of what I'm doing well, and then when
Yeah.
there's some opportunities for growth. And she'll tell me like, I did not like the way you said X, Y, and Z to me during this time. And I'm like, I don't even remember. But I think that kind of cultivates that space where it's like, okay, growing up, could remember, mom and dad telling me like, you could tell me anything. And then when I do tell them that something, it came with a consequence, right? So then that does not make me feel confident, secure to be able to express whatever it is that's going on in my little mind at that time. I'm going to finagle a little bit, right? And so we try to create that space through our family meetings. And then if it's something that's happening in real time, we've created something for her, like a safe space. Like it's like she's battling with something, or there's some thoughts going on in her mind about something that she's just not sure how to process that. It's like you can either talk to the both of us, write it down on paper, and present it to one of us, whomever, to just be like, hey, mom, dad, you know, I want to enter a safe space to tell you this things that I'm feeling.
Mhm.
And we'll make the time. If we need to go out and have something to eat, go catch a movie, and then process it after the fact. But it's like we give those opportunities for her to be able to build that muscle, so
Yeah.
that she feels comfortable expressing herself. Again, not things that I had. My wife grew up with that, but theirs was just more like, we're just gonna hash it out. We're gonna talk it out, and then at the end, it's like we're gonna hug and just make sure that
Mhm.
we leave off with this thing. So it came out of that. It was birthed out of that, and I think that's helped us greatly. And Savannah's still a child, so she's still gonna make mistakes, and we're again we're still learning as parents
Yeah,
and we're
right.
still
Each
learning
generation mistakes.
as individuals, right? But and so the beautiful thing about it is that we all again are growing and learning and kind of understanding each other, our ticks, our quirks,
Yeah.
and then how do we support each other as a family. And so that's been something that we've implemented that I think that's been really beneficial for our family.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing that. And you talk about how you definitely think and believe that that's beneficial. When I think about some of the families out there that when we say safe space, we say emotional space, physical space, psychological space. And the fact that you all are creating that and being very intentional. And I know there are families, especially dads, that bring this level of masculinity dipped in a fear based,
Hmm.
authoritative based approach. Why do you believe, or what is the benefit of creating that emotional space, that safety for our kids now? What do you believe is the benefit for that later?
Yeah. So I think it encourages them to not one fear. I think a lot of the things that we do, even in terms of how we motivate our kids, right? If I think about again my own experiences with my coaches, right, screaming on me, right? But and the other thing I would say to this, I just don't want to get this to come across wrong, is that you have to know the child that you're dealing with and what motivates them to get to whatever the next level is, right? Comfort or whatever. I don't think that being, if a child needs that motivation where it's like you need to be on them, I think that's okay to an extent, right? But I think what I found that's what's working for me is that it didn't work for me. And so I want to try something different. And the reason why I say it didn't work for me, I still feel that I've grown up to be a decent member of society, right? But a lot of the things that I do is fear driven. And I think fear, if you don't have like a support system to understand that the things that you're doing is fear based, it can hold you back. And so the idea that I'm trying to instill in her is that you don't have to be afraid. That's like the foundational element of where I'm coming from is like, I'm scared of spiders. No grown man is ever going to be able to acknowledge that on camera, but I
Hey,
don't
hey,
do spiders.
I got you. I don't do spiders either.
Right? But I try when it comes to spiders in the house, of course, that is the one. I'm like, a part of me is like, what makes you I've expressed that I am afraid of spiders. What makes you believe that dad has to be the one to fix this particular situation? How about we try to figure out what we can do collectively because I'm afraid, you're afraid, she's afraid, and work out to figure out what we can do together to figure out how we deal with this thing, right? And I think that's a little bit different as opposed to me being like, oh, because I'm the man, I have to put my fear to the side for the comfort of this. And I don't think that's teaching her that like men can be afraid. It's okay for a man to be afraid. But I think that where the growth happens is that even if my partner, when she gets older, is afraid, I can be a support to him. That's the beautiful lesson that I want to teach her there, right? It's just like you just can't put it on him and then you walk away from it. It's like you figure out this together. And then we figure out maybe we go get a broom. You hold the dustpan and I'll sweep it in. You can leave it there. I'll pick it up and run and toss that thing either outside or in the toilet,
Get it.
right? But we work together to deal with this spider and we walk away high-fiving and excited and share that in that experience. And we overcame. So the next time the next spider comes around, it's not a matter, Dad, there's a spider over here. Go get the dustpan and the broom and let's get this done. It's like we've built on something and we continue to get better at it. And so I think long term it's just like kind of breaking down some of these societal norms
Hmm.
and kind of figuring out what works for you, in the moment and what kind of support that you realize that you need in the moment, and then being able to verbalize that, communicate that with others so that they know where you stand. And I think that's very important, both for our boys and our girls, to
Yeah.
be honest.
No, yeah, true. And I definitely think like, fear, I think fear can have a result. I grew up in that same type of environment where fear kind of drove most of the decisions from a parent to child relationship. But I do think that while fear can yield results, like it also yields other things that aren't visible at the time. My
Hmm.
wife and I talk about this often where you can certainly get immediate results by pumping fear into something to your children, do this thing or this other thing is going to happen, some of the consequences. But what I've learned, and I really, I think I learned this after having kids, was like when you drive that, and that's your driving force in decision making, parenting, like some of the things that are missing, like problem solving, which you're talking about right now, where you're creating an environment where you can problem solve. Your kid might say, "Hey, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do the thing you're asking me to do," and you have a choice. Like I can say, like, "No, you're going to do it because I'm the dad, and if you don't do it, like I'm creating this fear element. If you don't do it, then this other thing is going to happen." But what I take away from my kid is their ability to problem solve. I take away their voice. I take away some of these things that I believe will never show up until later in life, man. Like, when they get a partner and
Mhm.
now all of a sudden they grew up in an environment that was raised and driven by fear, and there's things they didn't get a chance to practice. And so I think it's so important that you guys are creating these spaces and environments for your daughter that in reality, like she's practicing, so when she's older and she's making, some of those grown adult
Make a
decisions,
decision.
when she's in a relationship with a partner and um there's a difference of opinion, or like she won't have that, like, oh, I'll just back down and let them make the decision. So, man, I commend you on that, man, because that's been something that I've learned throughout my process of parenting. And my wife is, I like to say like she's the one that's the guru in like looking at things from a conscious parenting perspective and really helping me see things differently. And so to hear you talk about just creating that safe space, that environment, having those conversations with your daughter early, let her voice carry weight and mean something is so critical, man, because there are dads out there that look like us, man, that their traditional way of parenting is replicating what they experienced. That's like the path of least resistance, man. Like it's hard to
Yeah,
do it differently, man. Like it's hard to do it differently. You can go back to the old school ways and be like, yo, I'm doing this because I want this result. Sometimes immediate results ain't always the best, man, because then you got the
right.
delay results later.
Yeah. And I think the other important, I think what you just said, you just summed up everything. But I think the other important thing too is like sometimes you see these things. Me personally, like, again, there's no right or wrong way. I've seen, some parents do the traditional way of like correcting their kid in public. And great. I think that, like you said, the message gets through in the moment. But I think what's missing is like the long-term impacts of that. And I think what's beautiful about what my wife shared to me about their experience is like they would not walk away where there was conflict. Her mom made sure that once they hashed everything out, aired everything out, and everyone was good, now go hug your brother.
Mhm.
Right?
Right, right.
Go hug it out and a family hug. And I think sometimes I feel like that's the missing piece in the way of like the old school way, right? Like I could think about my parents. It's like once I got my, lashing, or if I got my whooping or I got talked to, go to your room.
Yeah,
And that
it
was
was
it.
done.
There
Yeah,
was
it was
no
done.
there was no follow through. There was no, what was I supposed to actually learn from this other that I'm quote unquote bad, right? And so in those moments when I do see it live, if it's somebody that I have a relationship with, after things have blown over and we're back to talking about the football game or the soccer game, hey, man, let me hit you up, like, and later it's like I saw what had happened, with this situation or whatever have you. Let's have a conversation about it, right? And if you're open to it, and then we'll meet and we'll have a conversation. Then that's just the type of personality that I have. It's not me again saying anything about your perspective is wrong or you did anything wrong. But let me share some of my experiences with you. And let's talk about your own experiences, right? And maybe I might be able to highlight some things for you that connects where it's like, oh, okay, maybe I didn't, again, don't change who you are, but just think about the long-term impacts and what it is that you can do to maybe try to mitigate some of that or fill in those gaps. And so I think that's the important piece that sometimes is missing. It's like, you have to have that conversation. Discipline is not punishment. My dad used to tell me that all the time, and that didn't hit me till I turned about 30, right? Like discipline is important, right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
We need it, right? But the follow-up part of it is that's a great like one-liner, but okay, you're not talking about the impact of the discipline with me and allowing me to like be expressive to understand what lesson were you trying to teach in that, right?
Man.
And why is it that you're doing that? It's fear driven, But a
Yeah.
lot of times, adults will talk about like protecting a child from the world. I don't know what that means. Like, break that down to me in real terms. It's like there's police brutality out there. You know, there's these things
Yeah.
that are happening, and I would rather be the person to drill this in you so that you have a perspective and understanding of what's happening out in the real world, so that when you encounter this thing, you're aware of it and you recognize it, and you're not caught out, in a sense, doing something that can cost you your life, right? Then I'm like, oh, okay, I get where you're coming from a little bit, right? So that's the missing piece.
Yeah, man, I mean, that's a hot button, man. Just discipline, because you could say, what's the difference between discipline and boundaries, right? And then the
Mm,
idea of creating boundaries with conversation and discussion for the understanding versus, discipline can show up in a lot of different ways, man. And so, man, that's such a that's a real sensitive one for me because I
yeah.
use that language sometimes, when I'm talking to my wife and I might say like, they don't have no discipline and she'll quickly be like let's sit and talk about like what does that mean to you? What does it look like? What does discipline look
Hmm.
like? And how is that different from the outcome portion of trying to set boundaries that are firm,
Hmm.
because I think, when you start to think really peel the layers back of like discipline traditionally has come with something else at the end of that thing, right? Not just
Hmm.
it's not like your discipline is going to be we're going to sit down and have a conversation about it. Then we're going to talk about it. Like, discipline, especially I take you and I are in the same kind of age bracket area. And discipline meant something
It
completely
was
different.
different. Yeah.
So no, it's just that's a real big topic that I'm still trying um to explore the boundary setting piece because I also feel like there's an art of setting
Hmm.
boundaries, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
mean you just throwing boundaries and throw them out there, but to really be intentional about boundaries
Intentional.
requires work, man. It requires work and this whole fatherhood journey, I think one of the takeaways for me is like it always requires work, man, constantly,
Don't
constantly.
stop. You know, and I think you hit on something that I'm still working on is the boundaries aspect of it. And I think that's from as a child, just really like if I think about it, when I was in Ghana, the world was my oyster, right? Like I always tell the stories. I remember going to different places and like they would cut down sugar canes and we just be chewing on the sugar canes and and there's I can go anywhere and feel at home. And then I have my elders who'd be like, don't boy, you better, right? But I can go anywhere at that a very young age. Then contrast that against coming to the US when I came where my dad was like, I think super afraid because,
Yeah.
I got to the States early 90s. So you just coming out the crack epidemic. You're the Bronx is burning kind of situation. Like, so there was a lot of fear that I was not used to because I was just used to just being able
Right.
to go anywhere. And I
You saw that.
carried that. Yeah, I carried that to the Bronx and I would test his boundaries. Right. And do all of the things thinking I was still in Africa. But I think I get sometimes I get long winded, but to bring it all together is that boundaries are something that I'm still working on in terms of being able to set boundaries, like to actually set concrete boundaries so that it ties to the discipline, right? Like bridging those two worlds together, that
Yeah.
is the challenge. And I think I have the understanding of the discipline part in terms of like, how do you navigate that after the fact? But like, how do I set those proper age appropriate boundaries? Like we've made, and I think sometimes we've learned from. We've taken our kids to see some things that in retrospect we're like, maybe she wasn't ready for that, right? But you understand what I'm saying? It's like now I know better. Now we're gonna have the conversation. Actually, I think last night my wife was gonna take my daughter to see two movies. And she was like, what do you think about this one? This is the background, this is the background. But we had that conversation. It's like, I think she might be ready for this one, but this other one, I think we probably need to have a conversation ahead of time and point out some of the things that we've seen or we've read about so that she's prepared and that it's not something new to her. So again, it's the boundary thing that I think I'm actively, intentionally working on to be better and more direct and direct, concrete to define that so that the discipline piece, it's like you have both sides of coin or the story, and there's a firm understanding as a parent and as a child
Yeah.
in how we operate as a family, our values.
And let me ask you, would you say, would you interchange the word consequence with discipline, or you see those two as two separate?
I think consequence and discipline, I think they're different. Because let me think about this. A consequence is a result, the direct result of you, I would say, intentionally. That's a really good question. I feel like I might need to sit on that a bit.
And I was
Oh,
gonna
go
say,
ahead.
the only reason I'm asking that is because when other dads are listening, and
Yeah.
I'm also reflecting back to conversations I have with my wife. She always pushes me to be like, when you have these conversations, sometimes you gotta, dig a little deeper. And so I'm thinking about it, I'm hearing it, I'm like, okay, I definitely am a good, strong believer in, trying to set the boundaries and try to work on those. And then when I get to those two that I just said, that's where the old school part of me who grew up in the fear based, my brain wants to go to discipline. But the newer version of me is like consequence, because it's like, if I set the boundary for you and you don't do that boundary, we can talk through the consequences, right? We can
Yes.
sit down together and we can say, what is the consequence that that you're going to get if you don't follow this boundary, versus me saying, if you don't do this, there's going to be discipline, which you have no control, you have no contribution into what the discipline is. I as the father, or the mom, the
Hmm.
parent, we create what the discipline is. And so I just wanted to throw that out there, not to throw a wrench in things, but just to kind of reflect, maybe process, pause, like out loud, because as other dads watch this, that's something I really want
Yeah.
them to try to give some thought around, in terms of like, because I think consequence requires a different level of engagement and connection, and versus like, there's going to be a discipline for it. So anyway, I'm just throwing it out there.
No, that's real. If I'm following your thought, then yes. So we have our boundaries that let's say we agree on, right? The boundaries. Like, you can't do this. And we told you that from the jump. Then you commit an act that breaks that trust, or that thing that we had set up for the boundary. We can talk about the consequences. Option A, option B, option C. But ultimately, the discipline is up to me as the parent. What justice, in essence, right? Justice in terms of you committed, well, let me not say you committed this crime, but you broke this trust
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
this family dynamic. These are the consequences. And then I think sometimes in consequence, my wife and I, we deal with it in the moment, but then we also talk long term, right? Like, what could that look like? And so then it's like so we may say something like, okay, as a result, you're not going to play in this weekend soccer game, and you're not going to your grandmother's house for the weekend or whatever have you, and we're taking away your electronics for a week. That is the justice that we are implementing
Okay.
because you broke this trust. And I just want to make sure if that example is in line with how you were kind of explaining.
Yeah. So what I would say to that is, in the decision for the what you are calling discipline, you listed three things. Would those three things really help your daughter realize the connection, to not breaking the breaking the trust meant, I'm not gonna I'll use my kid as an example. Like, breaking the trust means
Yeah,
like, you're not gonna get your tablet because you broke our trust, so you're not gonna get the tablet. Now she's more upset about the fact that I'm taking the tablet away.
the
And
tablet
now
away.
the whole point of like, what I really wanted you to do was, to honor the agreement we made. I really want you to understand the importance of like, so now when I think about consequences versus discipline, and again, I'm only throwing this out here because it's an area that I find myself falling into, like this like internal trap of like, discipline to me means one thing, where consequences to me means
Hmm.
something different. And so in your example, or using my own, I would say like, instead of me saying, I'm gonna take your tablet, I would now have to think through like, okay, talk to my daughter about, there's consequences for our actions. Like, if we don't do X, there's consequences. Now let's talk
Yeah.
through what is a consequence that I know we can work through together. And I'm not going,
Okay.
I'm obviously not going to give her, she might be like, yeah, I can't, I'm gonna sit in my room and read for an hour. No, no, we're gonna have to go to consequence option B. Like, let's talk through some
Yeah.
of the consequences. So that's my whole thing was just,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure
No,
it out.
no, yeah, I think that's what I was trying to say. It's like we talked through the consequences that's directly related to the trust that was broken, right? So whatever that looks like, if that looks like we did some research and we want to talk about it again as a family, that doesn't take away from the discipline part of it. It's like if the tablet's going to be taken away, the tablet's going to be taken away. However, we're either going to, well, not either, we're going to talk about this as a family and let you understand kind of like why you're getting this discipline and how you broke this trust. And then again, we think big picture is like you start with this small thing now, but how can that tailspin into something greater if you're not aware or understand kind of like the behaviors that you are displaying to us at this stage? Because we're adults, right? We have a little bit more perspective, and so we see these things, and so we can tell you, but you may not really get what we're talking about. So let's actually sit down and give you an example of what this actually means so that you have an
Yeah.
understanding. And that might come with maybe write something about what we discussed. Like, what
Hmm.
did you understand about this discussion that we just had? So that could be a piece of that. But I think at the end of the day, where my wife and I have come to is, and it took a lot of work, I would say, because
Yeah.
we were soft. We were soft with the discipline part, but we've gotten better. Is that what we have outlined as the discipline is not going to, like, whatever? I guess it sounds like consequence, but whatever the that we've determined is going to be the outcome of your actions is not going to change. We're still going to do this middle part just so that there's understanding, there's an awareness, and there's a connection as to how A ended up to C,
Yeah.
right? And the work that we're doing in B is just is vitally important to both of these things. And
Right, right,
so,
right.
yeah,
Yeah,
yep,
man.
yep,
My
yep,
my
yep.
wi- my wife is man, she's been really great at like helping me or us see where our responsibility was in
Mm,
the in the barrier that was or the boundary that was
see,
broken,
broken.
right? And that's to me, that's like a whole different like, oh, I can give you an example of like, your daughter gets into the makeup and you tell your daughter, hey, don't get in that makeup bag, leave it alone. Or don't get in that nail polish because if you get in it, it's gonna get everywhere. And my daughter gets in the nail polish. And then the nail polish gets on, whatever. Now, one, we gotta go back to like, I told you not to do
The
this
beginning.
thing, here's why, all the stuff. But then my wife she'll be able to say, like, well, maybe, this also means like we need to spend more time with her learning how to do nail polish. Why does he want to do the nail polish so badly? Does that mean
Hmm.
that there was attention that she wasn't getting because we was on tablets or phones or whatever the case may be? Why was I not present while she was
Hmm.
doing that thing? So it's been, it's been a real eye opener, man. Process, journey. Again, the
Yeah.
word journey is it's been definitely a good journey, man. I would say I wanted to ask what has been rewarding? What's something that you feel has been rewarding,
Mm,
a rewarding moment, man, with your daughter?
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'll say this. So I ran track and Savannah runs track. And I remember first day we took her to track practice, it was raining. Her tiny little self had her little hoodie on and running. And I thought she was gonna quit. She's gonna be like, this ain't for me. So they had her run like maybe like a 200 at 6 or 7. And she did that thing. I think internally I'm like, I want her to run track, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like
Of
at the
course.
same time, I still want to be like, figure out what you want to do. And so I think that was the first time that I saw that she had like the stick to itiveness that people talk about. So I thought that like any kid, first time going out there, I thought because of the rain and how hard they worked there, that she was gonna be like, nope, I'm done. She's like, no, I want to run track. So we did that. But the reward that I want to talk about is last year. Last year or this past track season, she ran in the 11 and 12, I believe, age group, and she just turned 10. She's going to be turning 11 this year. Her name is Savannah, and so the nationals was taking place in Savannah, Georgia. And so like she was kind of going through the stage. Coach was telling us like right around this stage is when they start to have the thought about, I don't really want to do track or like it's too hard or whatever. But something about the Savannah, Georgia piece, the goal, wanting to go there, like we've talked about Savannah, Georgia before, wanting to go there kind of lit something different up in her where she came to me and asked me like, Dad, what do you think are the times I would need to be competitive enough to be able to make it to Savannah, Georgia? Because I really want to go. And I was like, oh, I could do that research for you. So I did the research and gave her the numbers. Like, these are the numbers that kids ran last year there. And so I think if you hit this number, more than likely you're going to be able to make it. But the caveat is we're not going to travel to just Savannah, Georgia from Seattle, Washington for one event. You got to qualify for at least two. So gave her the numbers and she blew the numbers out the water. And I think for me as a dad, a love for track, my selfish love for track, I was like, yes, yes. But I think what I got from her and what I've learned from her is that she's goal driven. You give her something and, and she's going to be focused on that thing. And I feel like that's the little secret that I have that I've shared with her coaches, with my wife. It's like, we have to keep her focused on the thing.
Mhm.
And if you give her the thing, she's going to do her part, of course, with the support to get it done. But if like she's given the thing of just like, just run, right? And do your best, that's not it. You got to give her the goal. But I was really, really so proud that one, she was able to, make it to Junior Olympics, pretty much running against 12-year-olds as a 10-year-old, right? And she set a goal for herself and she was able to crush that goal and set herself apart and be able to accomplish a dream that she had set for herself. And so I think that's probably been one of the most rewarding things that I've had the opportunity to experience. And then for us to be able to go to Savannah, Georgia, and just experience that moment as a family was pretty dope too.
Man,
Yeah.
that's dope, man. And I definitely see like full circle moments of, you describing that example and some of what you've described in terms of how you guys pour into her. I definitely see that showing up, man. We always end the interview, the session with just a question, same question. But if you had to give words to another dad, any dad out there with
hmm
love, what would you say?
Um, to the dads out there, I think I would say that trust yourself. Like, I think, like I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, there isn't a manual. You don't have a roadmap. There isn't a guidebook. You can read all of the different books, but as we discussed, like after a couple of weeks of going through the experience, you're probably going to toss it out. I was like, yeah, this stuff is not working for me. So I think trust your instinct and lead with love, man. I think, if you can lead with love, everything else will take care of itself. And then I think the other piece I think we kind of spoke on big was don't be afraid to reach out to either your community for support, or if that's not working for you, reaching out to, a therapist or, a spiritual counselor, someone to just sit down and break bread with, to be able to talk about the things that you're going through, because our kids need us, right? Like, they need your mom and dad, or, they need that structure, right? And so you are an important piece to that. And don't forget it. So I think I said three things, but it's like, like you take care of yourself, lead with love, and everything else will take care of itself, pretty much.
Man, well, appreciate having you on, man. Sharing your story. I think what you brought today was really powerful. Definitely remind us of the importance of being intentional. I think looking at, health, personal health, mental health, and just trying to be the best version of the father that we can. So appreciate you being on, man, and being a part of the From Dad with Love community. Thanks for tuning in to From Dad with Love. If this episode made you laugh, reflect, or just feel seen, please share this with another dad doing the work. Until next time.